I say this every time we do the technomancer thing. We're going to turn soldiers into technomancers. You want the ditch diggers to be wizards? We're ditch diggers. That's what we do. And I got bad news. The ditch is full of people.
Yeah.
It's dirty, bloody, nasty business. It's just never going to be clean sci-fi. It's going to be, hey, Ranger, go cut off that dead guy's hand so we can figure out who it was.
Right. Yeah.
That's the reality. I think everyone that I've ever met that went to Iraq and Afghanistan thought they were going to a much fancier version of war because, we have heard all of that for decades and decades. And then you get there and you're like, nope, it's bloody and it's walking and it's getting in a trench full of shit because that's where the locals send all their refuse, and it's blowing up a house and finding out that there's one bad guy and 6 good guys inside of it. And that's reality. And you live with it the rest of your life. And none of the tech did anything to solve any of those problems. It's just off to the side.
Let's get some semblance of sequence and order here. I need to talk about something really important here at the top of the show. So it's come to my attention that CEO Nick Caparella has the authority to issue us a sponsorship for the podcast to be a Rip It platform. He has the authority to do this. It's come to my attention. I was thinking I would talk with Reveal's corp dev team about spinning up an M&A package so that we could just get National Beverage Corporation under the Reveal umbrella. So
it should be easy.
Kevin, go work on that one. Off camera. Kevin's over here off camera. So thanks, Nick. We look forward to doing business with you, Nick, and appreciate in advance your consideration.
Headline.
But also, I could just use a Rip It right now. Hot, dusty Rip It.
This is breaking news that the local CEO has discovered that non-local CEO has authority over business. Huge story.
Yeah, big story. It's breaking news, dude. Breaking news. Dave, has your heart rate settled since 2 weeks ago when you drank that power flavored Rip It? Has it come down, or is it markedly higher?
I'm not gonna lie. I really should have checked the caffeine on that can. I couldn't find it anywhere, but I was up until 3 a.m. in the wood shop after
1,000 milligrams.
That was a terrible decision to drink that at 3 p.m. my time.
1,000 milligrams, probably maybe 2,000 milligrams of caffeine. Something.
It's like 160 milligrams in a 16-ounce can of Rip It.
Well, to your point last week during our conversation with Chris Miller, these are small cans, or at least the old ones were. They packed a lot of milligrams per fluid ounce in those old cans.
Apparently, that is double of what's in a Monster.
Dude, unhealthy.
Based on my quick Google search there.
Unhealthy.
It was, yeah. I'm drinking a 16-ounce Monster right now because, Simon, we just had 3 long days. But I will not have a problem going to sleep tonight. I had a problem after drinking that Rip It.
It's 3:30 p.m. your time,
right?
Dave. That's risky business. I don't know. Maybe I'm that much older than you, and I just can't handle it. But.
Well, you recently had your marathon event, right? This is ours, where there's breakfast with somebody through 10 engagements throughout the day, through the first cocktail party, through the dinner, through the after party. It's a 16, sometimes a 20-hour day.
Yeah,
I'm still so I need the caffeine.
Well, you're talking about AUSA in DC. We'll get to that in a second, but just in case people don't know who they're listening to, this is the Goat Rodeo Podcast. Welcome to the Goat Rodeo by Reveal Technology. I'm your host, Garrett Smith, co-hosted by Simon Kuhn and Dave Cottle. We talk about everything from geopolitics to venture deal book in the defense tech space to policy stuff on Capitol Hill and the departments and everything in between. And I just need to call out the big geopolitical item from the last week has been that somehow, maybe even against the odds, a ceasefire, maybe even peace, has arrived in the Israel-Gaza conflict. I think there's a lot of interest in whether and to what extent this was a Trump Nobel Peace Prize worthy play, or if it was something else and more complicated. Certainly, it's more complex and complicated than we on the outside will understand. But pretty interesting, and hopefully the ceasefire holds. I think most, if not all, of the hostages have been returned as of earlier this week, and obviously we've seen ceasefires or temporary ceasefires and violations follow almost immediately after, but it seems like this is sticking for at least the few days following the announcement. Any commentary on this from either of you guys?
It's hard to. When was the ceasefire actually signed? Was it this week or last week?
It was last week. I think late last week. I'll look up the date here.
So it's hard to like untangle the delta between when it gets signed and when operations like actually stop. Because I feel like I've seen reporting at least twice this week that both sides still conducted at least one strike. And it's hard, obviously difficult to disentangle stopping operations that are already in motion and, where things are. So I'm sort of candidly holding my breath.
I mean, so live kind of right now today, and we're recording on Wednesday, the 16th, but there are saber rattling kind of noises coming from all parties. Latest as of the last hour is President Trump is saying if he says they're good to go, Israel can resume fighting in Gaza. And this is a result of Hamas potentially escalating or the Israelis poking the tiger, all of that stuff. And it's a mix of different, actors over there. And I'm not maybe calling balls or strikes here other than just to say fighting could break out any moment again.
Especially since I think it's been reported pretty credibly that there are quite a few Israeli forces still inside Gaza.
Oh yeah. So that was
they have not fully withdrawn.
Well, that wasn't necessarily a component of the ceasefire agreement either. This was one of the key elements that people thought was an insurmountable obstacle that Israel didn't want to fully withdraw, and Hamas wanted them totally out. They both went in with kind of maximalist positions on that topic specifically, and the pressure campaign that resulted in a ceasefire agreement and the return of the hostages allowed for some remaining IDF forces in Gaza or Gaza City.
Yeah, I think my point is like saying that you're going to pause kinetic operations, but also still having the physical presence there. I mean, you've got the adversaries right next to each other in time and space. It's just not. It's hard. It's hard to say no kinetic operations until
very easy for a young person to just throw a couple rocks and spark that thing right back off.
Right. Yeah. And interesting as well. Like the hostages were seen as the key element of Hamas leverage in the equation, and if they really have returned all the hostages, to include remains of those who died in captivity or were killed, and their remains were held on by Hamas, they've essentially returned all of those things. So that's like their only real key, strategic leverage in the equation. It's a confusing situation, and I would not be surprised if war basically resumed in the next.
It'll be interesting to see how the West reacts, though, because to the extent that there's still some Western support, or there's not an insignificant amount of Western support for Israel in the conflict. A lot of it hinged on that hostage messaging. And for anyone who's been to Congress in the last year or two, you'll see pictures of hostages outside of offices. This is like a key component of American support, American political support for the operations there. So it will be much tougher to message around this conflict if it resumes in the absence of hostages.
I mean, that is, I think that's, at least the analysts would say that is why Hamas agreed to all of this, because if they no longer are holding hostages, it delegitimizes Israel's continued involvement within the borders of Gaza, right? Like it delegitimizes the Israeli activities. But I mean, the only ally that really mattered in the equation was not the West. It was the United States. The United States was
we are the West.
We are the West, but at the same time, like you saw like
I meant me.
You are the West. Yes, sorry. Simon Kuhn is the West, and outside of Simon Kuhn's opinion, states like France and Great Britain came in basically on the side of, if not Hamas explicitly, then certainly on the side of a Palestinian partisan kind of position. With
not Germany, though. Germany was vociferously on the side of Israel.
Yeah.
But not materially, to your point, right? Materially, the support was us.
the only material support, the only diplomatic and political support that really matters in the end for Israel that at the crucial moment is the United States. I think long term, we talked about this last week with Chris Miller as well. Israel may have won the battle in a much larger kind of strategic war narrative that might not be going their direction based on their inability to garner philosophical, ideological support from the rest of the West.
It'll be very interesting to see what happens to the Netanyahu regime in the next 6 and 12 months.
Yeah. Whether that right inflected coalition holds, we'll see.
So I think that's a really good point. So they paused the overt strikes. I mean, this seems like a strategic win for Israel, right? They pause the overt strikes. They can reframe as being responsive to like international calls for restraint and, reopening humanitarian aid and all. They get the hostages back. Meanwhile, potentially controlling or shaping part of that narrative and can very well just continue operations, right? Should they choose to?
I think the United States has something like a leash that they've got on the IDF right now, and who knows how real that is. I think key in this equation has been that it wasn't just the West that pushed for a ceasefire. It was actually Gulf and Arab states who lined up on the side of Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff and the Trump administration alongside, the Hamas delegation and the Netanyahu camp, and pressured this thing to close, right?
Importantly, though, when that started to shift, particularly as it relates to Qatar, right? It seemed like the wheels really started turning, both with those Gulf states and with the Trump admin of like, okay, you can't keep, you struck, I think, like 7 countries in the last 3 months, with Qatar being the last one. And it kind of gets to a point where it's like, hey, you can't just like keep expanding.
Isn't it interesting that I think the Trump administration used I'm going to call it a botched Qatar strike by the Israelis, which didn't actually have the intended effect of killing some of the leaders they were targeting in Qatar. But the Trump administration was able to publicly admonish Israel for taking that action, but also use it as like leverage against basically the misaligned Arab states in the West to get everybody on board to a ceasefire plan. I don't know. It's either really canny political maneuvering, geopolitical maneuvering, or it's opportunistic, or it's both, or something. But I'm just glad this thing's winding down. I think it's showing on live social media feeds all over the world, it's showing how brutal conflict and war can be, which is actually kind of the point that I think we want to make here. It's that no matter how much tech we think is going to feature on the modern battlefield, at the end of the day, it's really just human beings and really shitty human environments. And this didn't strike anybody as a particularly high technology war. It was just bloody and brutal and devastating.
Isn't it interesting though how like both with the recent Ukraine-Russia conflict and with the the Azerbaijani conflict before it, there was a lot of news centered on the technological advances happening on the battlefield and the way in which like tech was being democratized. But you didn't really see much of that at all in Israel-Gaza. You didn't see Hamas particularly taking on like innovative tech approaches. You didn't see Israel relying on new drone technologies, even though they were resourced to do really whatever they wanted in that space. It was very meat and potatoes, street by street, block by block stuff.
It is interesting to note that Palestinian Islamic Jihad, PIJ, and Hamas and others that were active in that in the Gaza scenario against the IDF and other folks, why did they not adopt some of these low-cost, asymmetrically impactful technologies like cheap one-way attack drones? All that stuff. I wonder what accounts for that. It could be that the West, not the West, the supporters, the international supporters of Hamas, didn't really want to proliferate that technology into Gaza.
But even in October, even like the initial attacks, what made you decide to pour your resources into 6 paraglider teams as opposed to a handful of drones? Like, what does a paraglider team get you that a couple of small drone strikes doesn't?
Some sexy revolutionary, memes.
Some sick pictures, sick memes right before all of those fighters are dead. None of them lived beyond October 7th.
I think it's darker and scarier and makes more of a statement, I think, is the unfortunate answer.
I think robots are way scarier than guys on paragliders. Guys on paragliders make me think of 2 dudes hugging really tight and just hoping they don't fall off. It's not intimidating to me.
Well, it's not. I wouldn't put it in the category of technologies, but the modernization of warfare or battlefields. I think the key one there in this conflict was the subterranean environment,
Yeah.
and how much it's going to feature in conflicts from here on out. I don't think it was, in the context of the Gulf, we talked about the Abrams. That there wasn't sort of standout in the context of Ukraine. We talk about one-way attack systems. I don't think it was a standout technology in this conflict, but there was certainly a modernization, which is.
Does it feel innovative to you? I feel like it's a classic defensive tactic.
What is a classic defensive tactic?
Going underground.
Oh,
Dig.
sure. I think that's where they put all their resources. And to the
Yeah.
extent they had any political capital at all externally, I think they kind of had to shut those channels off just so they retain the element of surprise.
To Dave's point, though, if you're going to fill the sky with cheap drones and I'm in a tunnel, there really aren't any cheap attritable systems that can navigate tunnel systems and do subterranean. Subterranean is a very hard problem set for those technologies.
Yeah, we encounter that all the time. Dave can probably speak to it most credibly with our reveal customer interactions across the SOF environment, many of whom have the mandate to develop and deploy capability that can extend into the subterranean environment.
I think it's pretty unlikely, though, that we ever get to a point, and Dave can also fact check me on this, that like we send the 101st into the tunnels. Like we'll JDAM those tunnels 6 or 7 times before we're going to send a whole division into tunnel fighting.
Or flood them or something. Yeah.
Right.
That was the interesting part. But I mean, the reason that this, unless there's hostages in the tunnels, right? That was the main factor here, right? I don't think anybody was seriously considering flooding these where there was potentially hostages involved, but also you're right.
Fresh water in Israel to burn. Right.
Don't you think also like the Hamas Palestinian thing here was intentionally look like the devastated victim to win an information war against Israel at some level, right? So like they didn't want to deploy higher technology solutions because it would make them maybe look too capable, and they want to come off in the international kind of press media environment as like the victims of the scenario. I don't know.
I have a hard time occupying that brain space. If it's me, I'm not looking to make myself be a victim ever. It just seems like not a strategy I could buy into.
I mean, I don't mind putting a little bit of like opinion into this one. Hamas is a Muslim Brotherhood foundational death cult that like really appreciated or leaned into the idea of using the human population around them as human shields, and that death on the Palestinian side was a strategic win for Hamas in the long run. And I mean, those are stated. Hamas leadership said things like, you love life more. What is it? We love death more than you love life, and things like that. And that's just like, that is crazy, scary stuff. And that's really different than the Ukraine-Russia front or what could happen in the Taiwan Strait and whatever else. But I think that, at the end of the day, the point we're trying to make here is that war is still people, right? And I think you said that before the show, Simon.
Yeah, if anyone had a ton of access to tech of every variation, and I think even if you look back in that, Kartox or whatever the phrase is, I'm butchering it, but that Armenian-Azerbaijani conflict, there were a lot of Israeli drones that were used in that conflict. And even Israel just wasn't, you hit a certain point where it's still a people business. Guys got to go dig the trench. You got to go walk the streets. You have to go building to building. And that's exactly, it was snipers in urban conflicts and all those classic things. It was GWAT 101 stuff. And I think there's a valuable lesson there because it very much feels like in this current tech renaissance, we are building for the war that we want. We have outlined what is like the most interesting and sort of hype cycle version of like, this is what the future army is going to look like. And I am deeply concerned that the future army is going to get to the battlefield and someone's going to be like, here's your shovel. This is what I need you to use.
Yeah, and they're going to take their heads-up display mounted helmet Technomancer outfit. They're going to put that into the Connex box, and they're going to go out and actually wage war.
They're going to turn it upside down to scoop dirt out of the trench. You're going to stack up your Talos exoskeleton and all those other pieces and use them as cover and concealment.
So Dave,
the world's oldest profession.
Here's the segue then. You were just at AUSA, one of the premier defense technology expositions in the world. Happens in DC every October. Obviously, Gov Shutdown had some amount of like, diminished crowd or whatever. But like on display were the offerings of the defense industrial base. What does it portend for the future of technology in modern warfighting?
Yeah, absolutely. And so Simon was there too. He was with me for the whole show. And to be fair, despite the government shutdown, AUSA was actually really great this year. It was still very well attended by the decision makers and our customers that we care about. We got to interact with all of them, and there was a ton of much more meaningful engagement, like B2B engagement, than there usually is, because the other companies are typically, or including us, are distracted, talking to all of their customers at once. And there was a lot more meaningful business to business integration and collaboration going on this year too. So it was actually a really good show.
Did you try on the headset though? Did you try on the EagleEye headset?
I did not try on the EagleEye headset. I did watch some folks try on the EagleEye headset. So you asked me the question, I'll answer it, right? So that was the talk of the show. Everybody that I watched try on the headset, I watched very few, I think no warfighters try on the headset.
Yeah.
I did watch a bunch of like the senior government civilian or industry types try on the headset. And the people that seemed impressed, I think, were more along the lines of the folks that have never, feared for their life fighting building to building.
Just for context for listeners and viewers, we're talking about the EagleEye headset offering from Anduril Industries, which got a lot of buzz this week, both in press, which I think there were a number of articles written covering the announcement or release of this next generation headset, and also at AUSA. You could go by the booth and try things on. So sorry, back in the story, Dave.
No, I think it was certainly the talk of the town. I think that I was unwilling to make an assessment based off of the crowd that was engaged with the headset. I think that the last rounds of this, we really learned a lot when we put it on paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne, right? The last IVAS set, and they had really negative and compelling things to say. I think I'll probably reserve most of my judgment for when we put it on an actual 20-year-old that's responsible for doing violence on behalf of the United States.
But he said, "I've got this shit figured out." I thought he had it figured out.
Well, I think I think that we've been working on it for 35 years. Some version of this, enabling the operator through a headset, enabling the infantryman through a headset. We've been working on it for 35 years. I think it's a very hard problem. Dave's personal opinion is that instead of trying different sets of vendors or different strategies to solve this very hard technical problem, to make it robust and make it trustworthy and reliable for an infantryman, I've always thought that we needed to scale back what we're attempting to accomplish and scale back the requirements. The enhanced night vision goggles that the soldiers wear now are very good. Enhanced night vision goggles plus here's where my objective is, or maybe here's where the friendly forces are, would be plenty. I'm not sure why you need to shield off the entire face and rely completely on optical sensing when the human eyeball is pretty good, especially during the day, and then you have ENVGs at night.
Pretty good is a really interesting way to talk about the most incredible marvel in the history of evolution, because your eyeball is just an extension of your brain, and it exists nowhere else in the universe that we know of.
Yeah, I mean, this is your point before we started recording, Dave. Like, the human being already has some pretty good, damn good sensors, and if you can extend those sensors with night vision capability, which is insanity. Like, vampires have night vision, I mean,
I trust my eyes. I trust I trust the Elwear, very simple Elwear sensor that's in front of my eyes. I'm not sure why I would basically record video and then feed it back to myself. I just didn't. I'm not convinced that there's such a capability leap here, and that we can make the technology robust enough to.
So let me say something in favor of some of this buzz, and it is that we should jump for joy that the best of the best and the brightest minds in the Capitol are getting engaged on national security problems. I actually do rejoice in that. I think that's an amazing thing. We were obviously in a minimally innovative state with a lot of the legacy players that were not up to the task, right? They were not up to the task of building the next generation of technologies and capability to a degree. And so to get this kind of like energy behind new innovations for warfighters is an incredible thing. But jumping back onto the other side of that coin, like my beloved Marine Corps, Simon's beloved Marine Corps, still doesn't have smartphones, right? Like almost 20 years after the launch of the iPhone and a full 20 plus years after the launch of like relatively smartphones like Blackberries and whatever else in the late 90s and early 2000s, the Marine Corps still is not deploying smartphones on the chests of operators like even the U.S. Army and the National Guard and the reserve component of the Army is. Like the Marine Corps is behind. And so is the Marine Corps about to leap over the smartphone revolution and adopt heads-up displays in the form of full face shield AR VR goggles?
So this is exactly an important point, because I think the criticisms that we're making here are not really of Anduril. They are of this as a concept. We've been trying to create this thing for 35 years, longer than the cell phone has been a smartphone. The Army has been trying to figure out how to give you a pair of glasses that tell you more about the battlefield. So we've been dreaming this impossible dream and wasting hundreds and hundreds, if not billions of dollars chasing this dragon. And I think what frustrates me the most is we have commercial solutions that get you 50, 60, 80% of the way there. And you look at Ukraine and it's the easiest thing in the world to just go buy a cell phone and we'll text each other. And that capability does not exist in the Army to send a message to the other people in your platoon one-to-one without just yelling at each other or hand jamming a radio the way we did in Vietnam, Korea, in World War II, right? Like that hasn't changed at all. So it seems impossibly silly to me that like we're going to strap on, we're going to put another $300 million into two different prototypes, and we are going to largely ignore that tomorrow you could stand up a communications and a situational awareness capability that runs on a 5G network that's ubiquitous across the world and that you can hide in, because you throw on any kind of headset, that bandwidth pull is going to require such sophisticated comms infrastructure that every enemy in the world is going to look at it and go, if you see anything that looks something other than a cell phone, blow it up. Do not bother. We're going to jam it. We're going to shoot it. We're going to strike it. You stick out like a sore thumb. It's just like a frequency hopping radio. You are wildly outside of the norm, and you're going to feel the pain for doing that in a near peer.
So
I want to say this just so that it doesn't sound like we're on a pure negative track here, because something in me, something in our generation responds positively to this idea of like, let's manifest the future, right? Like we want to manifest the future. We want it to be safer. And we're all military dudes. Like, yes, I want to operate with more situational awareness. I want to be more lethal. I want to be faster in decision-making. I want to save my people. I want to do the job. I want to get the mission accomplished. Something in me is like tickled by this kind of an announcement and other futuristic kind of stuff. Like, again, the exoskeleton, the Talos exoskeleton, like something in that is like, yeah, I mean, there's something cool about that. There's something good about it, but we're like overreaching, right? It's
the only thing I ever wanted was lighter sappy plates.
That is true.
Yeah, that's the only thing I remember desperately wanting. I wanted sappy plates that were smaller, and every year they gave me sappy plates that were bigger and thicker and worse. And I was like, I don't feel any safer. I just feel heavier.
So I'll come at this from another angle, and one of you can fight me on this, and maybe you will. The Talos suit is a good example of if you figure out how to match the range of motion and power that suit, all these insanely hard technical problems. Why are we putting a human being in it? And the same for the SBMC headset. If you solve all of these complicated problems with advanced optical sensing and advanced sensor fusion and automated like decision making, if you solve all of these problems, why do I need a person in it?
Power and cost.
Like
I tell you that one right now. It is so much more expensive to create something that generates energy the way a human does versus a machine that can just like go out and run itself.
It's
right?
the Matrix. I'm the battery.
All I need is a Rip It and an Otis Spunkemeyer muffin, and I'll go out there for like a day.
As long as it's a chocolate.
So like we're building things that enable that, like true, once again, like the evolutionary marvel that is the human body. You can stick a couple of doodads on me and I am psychotically more efficient. I'm just annoyed that we have skipped so many of the obvious doodads to go after this like really almost impossibly challenging version of it. And I think it's a great project for DARPA. And I think that's what DARPA does best. They do these challenging things that are sci-fi, and then you peel off useful stuff and you push them into the force fast. That's my ideal version
Or,
of what
or
Darby
to just do what we did with militarized cell phones, which is just wait until the metas of the world or whomever make these capabilities so robust that we can then militarize
I
them.
was thinking about it because like the
Right.
Oculus is a $300 headset. And these headsets are still in this like $30,000 and $40,000 range. And I'm like, you're overdoing it. If it was $300 IVAS headsets, I'd be like, yeah, put them out now. Like, let's see what happens. Even if you break them, fine.
So it'll be in 10 years, we've seen early prototypes of the Ray-Bans or whatever that provide additional sort of heads-up display information as you're walking around town. In 10 years, maybe there is some version of that that are as proliferate as AirPods. And at that point, then we go out and revisit this topic, right? I think this is pretty logical. We don't need to spend a gajillion dollars.
10 years is a hope, right?
This
Because the Google Glass got discontinued 10 years ago, right?
It might be 10, it could be 20. My point is, why would we try to solve this problem when you've got half of the major tech firms on the planet trying to solve it for the civilian population?
And it seems like the most effective solutions on the battlefield today are not high tech. They are low tech innovations on pretty well trod stuff. And it's more about how do I do it cheap and fast than how do I build the most fancy thing.
Do you guys remember the first strike rations? These are like the extra juicy, whatever MREs. Do you remember these?
No, I never got a strike ration. I don't know what that is.
For strike rations. Anyway, in the little like supplemental pouch in there, which had like toilet paper and salt and a tiny bottle of Tabasco sauce, which was also a great innovation, by the way. Tiny bottle of Tabasco. In there was a little packet of gum, a chewing gum. Chewing gum is an ancient technology at this point. But what they did to it, the innovation there, they caffeinated it, they laced it, I think, with maltodextrin. I mean,
yeah,
that's a battlefield innovation, man. That kept me awake in the turret for like multiple 10-hour tactical movements. That kept me awake. That's an innovation right there. And I was bouncing along with like PVS 14s jangling around in my head, laced to the gills with maltodextrin.
Yeah, there's an innovation I want. I want all 16 things attached to my rifle in one package.
Yeah,
give me a scope that does what a PEC 12 does and a flashlight does and blah blah. Like, take all the stuff off the end of the rifle. That would make my life immensely better. My arms are tired. You keep adding stuff to.
Well,
that probably exists. I'm out of the loop for the record.
We've now expended a lot of ammunition on this topic of innovating into the technomancer future. I think jury's out. I'm not. I'm not terribly optimistic, but again, I'm happy that there's energy flowing toward problems like this, and hopefully it doesn't suck up too much attention, energy, resources, and away from real innovations. But on the topic of innovations and funneling resources to innovations, our friends at JP Morgan have for many years been spinning up a national security-oriented practice within the firm, gigantic, obviously, firm with, world and geopolitics level consequences for even the slightest decisions from the CEO chair. Anyway, they announced in the past few days a $1.5 trillion security and resiliency initiative over a 10-year period, which includes $10 billion of direct investing into the defense and aerospace industry. And I've been tracking this for a little while. We've got friends and partners over in the mix at JPM and throughout the defense and investor networks. Historically, JPM hasn't done much beyond significant lending or debt provision into venture financing rounds, and they've been a part of some pretty serious initiatives. Latest of which that comes to mind was our friends at Firestorm Labs took a significant chunk of debt from JPM as a part of their $47 million Series A that was announced a few months ago, and I'm sure many others. Vector, I think, took some money from them as well. So I think as part of this announcement, they're planning on doing direct equity investments and potentially even leading rounds, which is very interesting for a firm like JP Morgan. And I think quite very highly of the team that I know is operating over on the national security side at JPM. I'm curious what you guys think, getting JPM in the mix. Does this tickle your fancies at all? Do you care? Am I the only one that cares? I shouted into the void at my co-hosts.
I have complicated, skeptical thoughts about venture capital in defense, particularly as it pertains to timelines on returns and whether or not a lot of these folks are like ready to truly ride the DoD roller coaster that I think most of us are on for mission reasons. There's a complicated conversation that happens there where I think a lot of us in the space are overwhelmingly more focused on results for people carrying packs. And if that aligns with venture capital, I'm very excited, but I'm not always sure that it does.
Yeah.
That being said, super excited to see just the broader like financial community realizing that one of the biggest businesses of America is just defense. And you do need to be engaged. You need to find out what that looks like. So I think it's a positive. It's a good thing.
I've long been skeptical of the idea that traditional venture capital, which operates on 10-year fund lifespans with relatively with a relative amount of impatience for returns on investment from venture investors who are not terribly involved with investments post-deal and who often are dealing with portfolio theory and power law, where they make lots of bets and a very few of them actually pay off significantly. All of that seems like a mismatch with defense. That being said, for the upstart and innovation end of the economy that seems to be generating at minimum a lot of buzz in the defense space, if not a ton of value, really requires a lot more patience. The national security buyer side doesn't want to see a lot of bets fizzle out halfway through program delivery, right? So like you need, it seems to me like a lot of this is mismatched. So I think the trend line is going to move in the direction of larger firms like JPM and perhaps more private equity players or more patient venture capitalists to get involved with the industry, and the kind of flash in the pan, impatient smaller firms are likely to fizzle out or find ways to offload their portfolio to other firms. But I'm encouraged that a patriotic American endeavor like what JPM is kicking off with this 10-year plan is a significant and positive one.
So, Jimmy, here, Garrett, because when I hear, I'm encouraged as well, but when I hear a bank, in my ignorance, a bank, wading into these waters, I assume that we're talking about the majority of their investments being very late stage, very low risk. I assume that they would start investing in like shipbuilding, and your first, or something like that, right? And your first example is Firestorm, which was actually surprised. Right? That is interesting. That's a lot earlier and riskier. I mean, not that like Firestorm's a great company, but that's earlier and riskier than I assumed would be
no.
kind of target.
I'm not casting shade here, and I admire Dan and the team over at Firestorm, but it's a Series A company. It's very risky. It's extremely risky. Like you'd be smarter to put down a bunch of like real estate bets than you would betting just in a probability of win basis. You'd be smarter to put money into real estate than you would putting it into early stage ventures like Firestorm, even though they are likely a winner coming out of this early stage ferment, right? Like anyhow, that is a much higher potential payoff, and it's a much more exciting project to be involved with, which with much more positive impact potential than a ho-hum real estate investment. But like, it's far from a sure bet. And having JPM involved that early in a venture investment is very interesting. And even earlier in the case of Vector. Firestorm's been around for a good number of years. Vector's been around for like 6 months out of stealth and maybe a year and a half in stealth, right? So
something like that.
Very young. Yeah. It would not surprise me if JPM did investments into like more like fundamental businesses like shipbuilding, where there's a capital intensivity that is not required from the early stage software-centric startups like, Reveal as an example. And I know that they intend to do that straight from the horse's mouth. I've talked to the team over there, and they intend to get involved with call it like infrastructure investments aligned with national security priorities.
Yeah, I assumed like onshoring TSMC or onshoring semiconductor, microelectronics supply chain sort of things. The really important, really big, really boring stuff that banks do, not the one-way attack UAS kind of game.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think that's right. In other news, our friends at Gotenna finally announced an acquisition. They were acquired by Forterra, another kind of up-and-coming ground autonomy robotics software play. Pretty interesting. There are these. We've talked a little bit about consolidation in the earlier or younger end of the defense technology upstart arena. Even though I think Forterra and RAI, which is the previous name before they were kind of rebranded, has been around for quite some time, but they are one of many that are kind of up-and-comers and intending to be a platform or a consolidator. Reveal styles itself in much the same way. Reveal intends to be a consolidator and as a multi-product platform company over time. Forterra is doing that with an acquisition of Gotenna. Pretty interesting. I'll be honest, I don't know enough about those two companies to really see the definite overlap and complementarity between the technologies. But I mean, vehicle to vehicle, low throughput mesh comms, I mean, it can make sense. What do you think, Dave? Are you close at all to any of the details?
I don't, maybe only a little bit closer than you are. I don't think I have a ton to add here, but I mean, I understand the ground autonomous systems, system of systems game. I can see a logical fit with Gotenna radios and pipes capabilities, right? I mean, that's not a stretch. Yeah,
it is. Data transport's going to be just a foundational linchpin for everybody.
Those machines have to understand where each other are in time and space and track and message and send data back and forth. I mean, that's very logical.
And another interesting thing to note here, you could either see this as complementary or not at all complementary. I tend to believe they are pursuing this line of thought in a complementary fashion, but Gotenna had, I think, quite a lot of business going in the Department of Homeland Security, non-DoD federal arenas, and they were less competitive in the DoD circles. That's, again, like bystander perspective on things. Forterra, obviously, going after major defense contracts for ground robotic autonomy, programs. Either of those things are complementary in the sense that one does DoD, the other does DHS, and combined, their powers combined, it's a pretty big, U.S. federal public market, go-to-market, engine, or something else. It's got to be complementary at some level, but, I don't know that those customer sets are overlapping in the way that, other businesses might want from
penetrating a customer set is a capability all its own, though. Right? Like one of the main things that both of those two get is the fact that they have penetrated two different customer sets, and therefore you now have a much bigger surface area for those two products now.
Yeah. I mean, I having spoken with Ari Schuler, CEO over at Gotenna, up to and through this acquisition, he believed that and had done a ton of work to make that a key value proposition of Gotenna as a platform. The customer relationships in a place where a DoD focused company might not have the access. So just congratulations to that team and to the Forterra folks. Hopefully this turns into a good early platform play. All right. Let's round out the show here, Simon, with maybe some commentary on what looks like it's approaching record level government shutdown timeline. Am I right?
We're in top 5 now.
Top five. Okay.
I'd have to go check my numbers, but there's a pretty sharp stab up, because I think number 2 is 21 days and number 1 is 35 days. So it's rarefied air for sure. So I get the immense joy of saying I was correct on predicting the shutdown, but unfortunately I had thought that we were going to get out of it sometime towards the end of this week, but the Senate's going home. So they've now failed to pass a CR 10 times in the Senate. There has been plenty of reporting that they've found a way to pay troops by moving some money around. I won't speculate too much on that, because I think it's pretty classic robbing Peter to pay Paul. And I say this all the time. The VA is funded on advanced appropriations, so they don't feel the shutdown. I think that's a problem. I don't want any Americans to suffer, but if the most impactful populations don't feel it, then there is no incentive for these politicians to get into a room and work on the hard problems. It gives them room to go home and be like, veterans are still getting paid, service members are still getting paid. I'm not worried about it. So there's a certain amount of pain feedback that we're pulling out of the system by removing, the hurt on Americans. And you could argue it both ways. I don't know what the answer is there, but for sure, right now, it does not look like Republicans or Democrats are sufficiently motivated to change their positions and find something in the middle. Both are pointing at each other, and I think this is going to unfortunately drag on for a good while longer. In the meantime, Senate did pass the NDAA.
Okay, let's stay at shutdown for a sec before we talk.
Sure.
NDAA. So I think you are rightly calling out here, and you did this a couple of weeks ago on the podcast as well, that it's going to take pain, right? Like the concessions will only come once sufficient pain is felt by negotiating parties.
Yep.
What is that pain going to be? If it hasn't already been felt, what is that pain going to be?
It's usually constituents. So when the military misses a paycheck, a lot of letters and phone calls start to pour in. And that's why you move money around, so they don't miss a paycheck. And so those phone calls and letters don't come in, and the members just don't feel it as ejectly. There's one House member in California I know that's had some articles written about him. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but he stayed in D.C. basically through the entire shutdown. And his message has been, if we're not here working, then we're not actually trying to resolve the shutdown. And I feel pretty similarly about the Senate going home. If I was Thune, if I was Republican leader for a day, I would make every single senator sit in that building until the thing opens back up. But it's a harder message to communicate if nobody's missed payments. Now, I'll say that we paid the military, but things like WIC and SNAP benefits, those payments are not going out. We've now hit that point of the shutdown. So the pain's going to get worse as the month drags on. Eventually, we're going to miss military payments. More employees got furloughed today. For folks that aren't tracking that, they usually start to furlough federal employees in like a tier system, but now that we're like missing paychecks, they're really sending people home. So you have hundreds of thousands of people not getting paid since going home from work right now. I mean, that's the pain.
Could this number be correct? 750,000 federal workers furloughed?
Yep. There's 400,000 in DoD alone.
Yeah.
Being furloughed.
Yeah. And that's just in the past few days.
Yeah. Three or 400,000 being furloughed out of DoD is only half of the DoD's federal workforce. Yeah. So they account for a significant portion of all the furloughs. But yeah, now that you've missed paychecks, they're just sending people home en masse. Like you can't expect these people to come to work if they're not essential.
So let's go open kimono a little bit and then go to NDAA, Simon. But Dave, shutdown's affecting us in the sense that we have open contracting actions that are waiting for, contractor activity or contracting officer activity. Do you want to maybe talk a little bit about that, and maybe not in dollars and cents detail, but like how this is affecting us? And we're one of the better positioned young non-traditional contractors out there. We know of other companies. I spoke to one this morning who had a contract canceled potentially because of like a Doge sort of a maneuver, but then the contract reactivation or reopening that contract, which was the planned action, was completely sidelined because of the gov shutdown, and they're probably going to fizzle and die as a young company, right? Like so these are the realities at the non-traditional upstart end of the market. We're one of the better positioned ones. It's still affecting us, and I'll be honest, I don't like it as an executive who has to turn in numbers to his board. So Dave, what do you think? What's the pain?
It's frustrating because business in this environment is a very hard one, right? And so we have the specific pain that I feel is we have one business. There is money that the federal government owes us to deliver capabilities, and for one reason or another that's related to shutdown, they can't pay us to either perform that work or deliver that capability, either because they're not authorized to, because the type of contract that we're using is waiting for a reauthorization, or because literally the people that would move that money in and make those awards are not at work. New opportunities are also paused, solicitations we were expecting. So both, the business that we've already won and our ability to continue to compete and win new business is all stalled. And it's incredibly frustrating both for us and for our customers.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, and in some cases we've shipped product, delivered product, could invoice or have invoiced on product delivery, and those sets of actions are still stalled at some level. and we're not alone. Like, and we're a well-positioned, well-capitalized company that are, we're doing fine. And like, but so I don't really have existential fears as a leader of a non-traditional, but I mean, it's aggravating because of the slowdown in business operations for sure. But, we're a mission-oriented company. All we want to do is deliver for warfighters. We can't do that, right? And like the warfighters are not benefiting from the product fielding that has been promised and at some level like contracted. So, yeah, real frustrating.
Absolutely.
Real frustrating. All right, Simon, any comments on that? And if not, take us into NDAA land.
No, I think we covered shutdown pretty conclusively. All we can all do now is sit and wait and maybe write your senators if you're feeling particularly froggy. But NDAA did pass. The Senate keeps looking at different things it can do besides just failing the same vote over and over again. So we saw them take up and pass NDAA last week. The House had already passed its NDAA earlier in the year. There's a bunch of things to watch in that space. The SPEED Act, the Forge Act are both pretty robust reforms of the acquisition process. They're going to have to come to some sort of conference agreement. Those aren't really conflicting pieces of legislation, but they are certainly taking different approaches. The real challenge of the NDAA honestly, is that the Senate NDAA is $30 billion larger than the House NDAA, which is more in line with the president's budget request. And Roger Wicker, the Republican head of the Armed Services Committee, has been signaling this for a long time. He wants to see a $1 trillion DoD budget. He wants to see it in the base. He doesn't want to see it in reconciliation in other places. And for those wondering, well, how do you get to 30 billion? You buy another ship or two. You buy 15 more F-35s. You get up 30 billion pretty quick. So I think what you'll probably see with NDAA is a conference bill probably hashed out over the course of this month and next, and a bill passing a law sometime late November, early December.
Obviously missing from the NDAA was something expected. At least I thought it was kind of expected to be lumped in with the NDAA, when that's the SBIR reauthorization.
So I think that'll probably end up in the conference bill.
Okay. Okay.
I was a little surprised that there was no floor amendments to handle SBIR reauthorization. It's an ongoing debate for sure between Senators Ernst and Markey, mostly centered on SBIR mills, right? Should we do a clean reauth, or should we hold up the reauthorization in order to limit the ability of businesses to endlessly win SBIRs and persist on this like fee for service RDT&E model? There's still plenty of space for that to get solved in conference. That's going to be largely behind closed doors. So another one of those things where if you feel strongly about SBIR reauth and SBIR reform, you should be reaching out to your senators and to your House reps and saying, hey, we need a vote on this issue.
So with the SBIR program having lapsed, which is my understanding of the current situation, and no reauthorization immediately kind of filling that void, we're in a lapsed scenario. What does that mean for companies either actively working on SBIRs or in pursuit of SBIRs, or the SBIR programs generally? Like, what does this mean?
Great news. It depends. So DoD's put out some guidance. Not all of the contracting officers across the DoD have necessarily received that guidance sufficiently to be able to feel safeguarded against the risks of taking on new actions and candidly spending appropriated dollars. So the Pentagon guidance is that if the dollars are already appropriated and it's not a new contract award, then there's plenty of room for folks to be executing on SBIR vehicles. Right. Not every contracting office feels that way. And then on top of which, the vast majority of the people that work in those offices are furloughed. So at a lot of places, you have one person just sitting in an office that used to have 15 people. And candidly, I don't know how you motivate a person who's not getting paid and covering down for all of their coworkers to solve these big national problems. SBIR's lapsed before. It's lapsed for sometimes months and some of those histories. So it's not like an unprecedented existential fate for SBIR just yet. I do think, this is my personal opinion, if we're going to be serious about this like innovation ecosystem, and this is something we strongly care about, SBIR is an important seed fund for a lot of small companies. 100%. And can it be abused? Yes. Everything can be abused. Let's not cut off our nose to spite our face here. There's been a lot of folks doing great work out there. I want specifically, and I don't mind shouting out, Eric Blott at the Alliance for Commercial Technology. He's been doing an immense amount of labor of love. These are not folks that are getting paid big dollars to lobby on cyber reform and cyber reauth. These are guys that are in the trenches trying to build tech for warfighters. But remains to be seen. Another one of those issues where if you care and you got a company that's worried about cyber, I'm being very emphatic here. Reach out to your senators, find out where they stand and what they think.
We just saw Eric at and he's a good dude, real good dude. Dave, give you the last word here. Are you feeling the lapsed cyber program rub?
Yeah, intimately. Intimately, I need
Intimately.
Damn. SBI. I need SBIR reauthorized because one of our principal contracts at Reveal is fundamentally an SBIR. SBIR contract to phase 3. It's hard to use that vehicle without SBIR authorization, although it might even be possible. Simon also came up with the interpretation challenges, the authorization challenges, and the personnel challenges. So I need SBIR reauthorized. I also just need the federal government to go back to work, and David would be happy. If you give me the last word anyway. Funny enough, we're talking about this. I was supposed to shave my beard and put my uniform on for the weekend, but I have canceled it for the organization that I command because there are too many furlough impacts to know that I'm going to be resourced to be able to execute what I need to do.
You're not alone. We have other folks in the company, in the reserves, and in the guard who are not going to drill this weekend, and you're not alone. I am, though, going to put on the uniform and go and promote a very good friend of mine next week, and that'll be a good time. So I'll shave, even if you don't. I might even get a haircut because this haircut's getting too long for this old Marine right here. That's ridiculous, isn't it? Isn't it just silly? All right, Simon, let's wrap on this. I keep seeing the hair and the top of the guitar neck. Who is that on your shirt?
Deep cut for real music fans, Chris Isaac.
Oh, it's Chris Isaac. Yeah, of course. Let's get hold on. I gotta see him. Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
his name's all the way at the bottom. That's real Chris Isaac fans. Only it's a toured shirt. I think it's 2016.
Of course it was like that Share tour shirt that you had that you could literally get anywhere on Amazon or whatever.
Yeah, but this one I had to go to a supper club in Alexandria and sit down with a group of mostly 50 and 60-year-olds and eat dinner while watching Chris Isaac play, which was 100% worth it. I recommend it.
That sounds like the time my mom invited me to go on a mother-son date to a Neil Diamond concert, and
sign me up, dude. Don't threaten me with a good time.
I mean, I didn't have a sequin jacket at the time. I wish that I had. But producer Ian, fact check whether you can get a Chris Isaac shirt like that. Simon's tried to pull the wool over our eyes previously.
Yeah, if you see one, go ahead and send it my way, though, actually, also.
On that note, boomers listening to Chris Isaac, that note, if that resonates for you, great. I hope it sends you into the weekend motivated and enthused as at the same level that it does Simon. Thanks for joining us this week, and we'll see you next time. Adios.